I'm going to wait for the recording, and then I'm going to start speaking. Thank you very much. A very good evening to everybody. Welcome to this licensing committee meeting. My name is Gareth Sykes. I'm the Governance Services Officer for this evening's meeting. I'm just going to briefly read out for both the members of the committee and for those watching the meeting the protocol for this meeting regarding remote meetings. Okay, only speak when invited to do so by the chair. All participating members are to keep their cameras on during proceedings. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communications via the chair. Please ensure that your mics are muted when you are not speaking, apart from the chair, who does not need to mute their mic at any stage to ensure the meeting is conducted effectively. If you're referring to a specific page or picture in a report, refer to that page number. If you're having any technical difficulties, please use the chat function to alert the meeting, or dial in on the phone number and use the PIN provided within the invite. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the committee. Just use it to raise technical difficulties. Any persistent disruptive behaviour will result in removal from the meeting. That concludes the meeting protocol. So we'll now move to the formal agenda, handing over to the committee chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Welcome everybody to licensing. So we'll start the meeting. Apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Gilbert-Smith. Are there any other apologies to be given now?
Chair, I'm not aware of any that have been reported to me.
I think Councillor David may be making apologies shortly. He's unable to attend.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest for any items on the agenda? No, thank you. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. The first we want to agree is the minutes of the previous licensing committee meeting held on the 9th of December. Are we happy to agree those?
Agreed. Agree.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. And then we have also to agree some subcommittee minutes. So the first one is from the 4th of February 2021. I think I was at that one, was I? Yes. Thank you, Councillor Snell. And okay, those are agreed. The licensing committee on the 15th of September. Are we agreeing those? I think that's the one that I can agree. And yeah. Okay. And then the 8th of October.
Those are the ones, Chair, where the decision isn't omitted from the review application. So I suggest we defer those for tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. We're deferring those ones for addition. Was it? Okay. Right. I will now ask. We'll move on then to item 4 on the agenda, which is an update on the late night levy, and I'll ask Samantha and David, Samantha Mathis and David Tuitt, please, to outline the report for us and take us through it.
Yes, I have some slides, so I'll just share those now. Is that visible for everyone?
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, so to start off this quarterly update, first I just want to update you on the year-to-date financials. So this year, receipts are still expected to be severely impacted. Annual income from off-license premises, such as shops, supermarkets, and takeaways, is estimated to be about 70K a year. While some payments are still being made, there's still a little bit of uncertainty as a result of the pandemic of how much money will come in regards to other types of licensed premises like bars, nightclubs, etc. Therefore, we've only forecasted the income from off-licensed premises for the purpose of this this financial update. So here you can see we do have a balance carried over as well from previous years of 260K. And our receipts to date, so that's from November 1st to the present, is 16,035. So that's down about 9% on that year-to-date forecast of 70K. But it is worth noting that the cyber attack has severely affected our ability to take payments in the first part of the year. And now that has been resolved. So we are taking payments regularly and catching up to the period for which we couldn't take payments. So we expect that to go up slightly over the next few months on the forecast. And here I've just outlined the expenditure to date. So we have had the police spend from August to November confirmed of 22,417. We have spent about 6,395 since the start of this new levy year on enforcement, administration and salaries. So this would cover the entire year, so up till October 31st of 2021. That totals 67.65. And to date, the Hackney Knights portal, the best practice, printed design, we've spent 6,328. So if we look at that expenditure compared to the receipts and the balance carried over from previous years, we're at about 173 in the late night levy pot approximately. So just to go into a bit more detail on the police and enforcement activity. So August to December period, we did fund some patrols Fridays and Saturday nights up to the lockdown period. And that included Christmas and New Year. So they had cars out, crewed with two officers until about 11 p.m. And they would visit licensed venues to ensure compliance with licensing legislation, as well as COVID requirements. And that includes off sales. And then in the January and February periods, after the Prime Minister announced the national lockdown, well, there was no activity there. We didn't use any funding for those lockdown periods. So there was no police spend effectively to date. And then the enforcement patrols, that spend that you saw, that's just for some enforcement activity prior to the January lockdown to assist with street drinking and any ASB caused by groups drinking in the streets. So not much going on so far with this lockdown, but it is looking bright. So we have seen a clear guideline for the reopening, and I'll just go through some of our future projects. So obviously there's going to be lots of new challenges in 2021 with this reopening. We're in the process of creating a greater policing plan, and that's based on community safety partnership objectives managed through working and tasking groups. And that includes members from the police and other stakeholders. And we're also intending on undergoing a detailed crime analysis that will be undertaken at the end of this year, so that we can actually track some long-term changes in crime patterns since the levy came into effect. We're also trying to create some other KPIs along with other boroughs that have a late night levy to kind of measure the effectiveness of the levy, as well as a licensee survey. So in regards to the Hackney Knights portal, so in January, when the lockdown was announced, the project was put on hold. We are aiming to relaunch in anticipation of the reopening, and with the added accreditation scheme that will be incorporated into the portal. We've already received over 100 signups, and an email invitation will go out to these licensees when the platform is ready to access. So bars, pubs, and restaurants will be given priority. And also just the GLA has actually chosen to use Hackney as a case study on how to properly utilize the late night levy funds. And this was based on all the work surrounding Hackney Knights, the portal, and the proposed venue accreditation scheme. And just a bit of something new, something that we were planning since last year. We want to introduce our Hackney Knights venue accreditation scheme. So this will be incorporated into the online portal, and it will see premises complete a list of criteria to be able to get a Hackney Knights accreditation. Once the premises receives an accreditation, they will also receive their Hackney Knights toolkit, which will include certificates and window stickers that they can make visible to the public. The scheme will have 3 different versions. So we'll have one version for bars, pubs, restaurants, and theaters. This is the first version that will be launched in April. Then we will then have a different version for nightclubs and high capacity venues. So it'll be a bit more crime prevention criteria in those schemes. And that's going to be introduced for the anticipated reopening of nightclubs in June 2021. And then finally, off licenses, we do want to develop a scheme that's tailored to them, and that will also become available in summer 2021, depending on what happens with the pandemic. So the criteria, we have liaised with many different services to create this list of criteria on which the accreditation scheme will be based. And that includes colleagues from business support, the culture office, public health, safeguarding, environmental health, waste, and the police. And the scheme has been determined by reviewing similar schemes in other boroughs and in the industry. So some that come to mind are like Best Bar None or Licensing Savvy. So these are different schemes that we've kind of taken into context and created our own scheme in-house that goes beyond just safety and encourages business to promote well-being, diversity, and inclusivity in nighttime spaces. We will present the full criteria for bars, restaurants, and pubs at the next committee meeting. But just to give you an idea, those are the categories there that you can see that we've based the scheme on. So you'll have a whole module on COVID-19 compliance, education and staff training, community, licensing, crime prevention, health and well-being of staff and customers, and sustainability and environment. So the licensees will need to pass all the mandatory criteria in each category in order to obtain the Hackney Nights accreditation. They'll also be able to complete bonus criteria for extra points. Once they complete this, they can submit their accreditation application to us, and we can approve if issues, ask them to address and then resubmit. We are proposing to commence a consultation process to activate a provision that would allow a reduction of 30% on annual late night levy fees for those operators who receive the accreditation. And the incentivization of the scheme will ensure its longevity, and it will definitely boost participation. The reduction would be applied on an annual basis, and they will have to refresh their accreditation annually in order to keep the reduction. The scheme will be managed and monitored by myself, the late night levy manager, and the rest of the business regulation team. And we will update the committee about the number of accreditations at each quarterly update meeting. We have also received overwhelming support from the business community through various forums. So I just wanted to give a little sneak preview. So please, this is just at the design phase at this point, but it'll give you an idea of how the licensees will be able to interact with the scheme. So they will have an actual dedicated section on the online portal where they can actually see where they are and what their progress is so far and the different categories that they can complete. So if you see here, you can see all the categories, and out of each category, you'll see how much criteria out of each one you've completed. So the criteria, essentially what we're going to do is guide them through each step. So for every step, there's going to be associated guidance. Everything's going to be right there where they can find it. Even if we need to signpost to outside sites, we can do so. We can create instructional videos to help them on their safety journey, and just ensure that, and they can also attach evidence of any plans or policies that we need to see in order to accredit them. So just to give you an idea of the feel of the platform, they'll be able to go through each one really and expand on each point, attach evidence, etc. And then once they complete it, so once they've reached 100%, they'll have to submit their results. And once we approve their results, they will become an accredited venue, essentially. And they'll be given a certificate that they can download, but they'll also be sent a little sticker for their windows. And this is going to go hand in hand with the reopening strategy. I think it will really help to get the COVID compliance where it needs to be for all these venues. And that concludes my update, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Samantha. That's wonderful. Great. Do we have questions on that presentation from anybody? Sem, Councillor Momer.
Thank you. Just very quickly, I would really like an example of how, on the equality, diversity and inclusion bit in particular, this is going to meaningfully support disabled access to venues in Hackney. We have a lot of very good venues, but the overwhelming majority are not accessible to people with disabilities, either visible or invisible. And I don't want it to be just a tick box exercise, and I appreciate there are costs associated with adjusting venues, but I think that's a really important consideration to take into account. And just off the back of some work that has been happening separately, also to take into consideration our aging well strategy as well, and the accessibility of people of different ages. It'd be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's part of our strategy to include disability as one of the inclusion points in that.
But I guess I'm just looking for a little bit more like how.
Yes,
Beyond
so
somebody saying that they're going to do it, what will we be?
Yes. I mean, I'm working with other colleagues in different services, but to be honest, it's a bit too early to kind of elaborate on exactly how we anticipate to do that. I think by the time we get to the next committee meeting, I'll have something more concrete to present.
Okay.
Councillor Snell.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm slightly confused. So first, I need guidance from you. That was a splendid, comprehensive report from Samantha, but we seem to have covered quite a lot of items on the agenda. So are we now talking to item 4, or are we also talking to the appendices and the consultation on changing the terms? Are we doing the whole lot in one go?
No, we're not. No, I think David Jewett will talk to us about the consultation next. So we're doing item 4, which is the update on the late night levy.
Okay, including the agenda. Okay, so I will save my comments on that for later. I first of all would wish to comment. We're reporting to meetings here on discussions that go at PubWatch meetings and at which tend to be combined with late night levy meetings these days. I've already raised this with David and with the chair of the Dalston PubWatch, but you know, there is it's absolutely essential that what we do not allow and report in the public domain, basically businesses slagging off other businesses and trying to get at other businesses to come out in the agenda. I mean, that is primarily down to the chair of those meetings, and I've raised it with the chair of my local meeting. But the mutual recriminations between businesses in Gillette Square do no credit to them, and should not really be in a public report. So I'd just like that noted, that what is stated at meetings does not represent necessarily the view of the council.
Can we just clarify that, Councillor Snell? Are you're not referring to the minutes from the late night levy, which are also included in this item? You're referring to PubWatch meetings outside of.
Okay, so at the end of the minutes, sorry, I can send details, but I'll dig it out and put it in. Can I put it in chat? I'll put the page number in a minute, yeah, so it's quite clear. The other thing that I wanted to say, so that's a slight negative. The other thing I wanted to say.
Sorry, so just clarify that. So that's a matter you're raising about something that was said in the late night levy minutes.
What is being reported?
Okay, that's great.
Sorry, it's on page.
Don't worry about it now. I'm just checking that that is really what it is. In that case,
PubWatch representative options and observations.
Okay.
Okay, I do not accept that the main issue for Dalston are issues around Gillette Square. We know it's a hot spot. We know it needs a lot of managing, but you know, we need to understand there are local factors there, and I don't really like putting that in the public domain. So I just want to make a comment that I've raised with officers. I just don't want us backing that perspective. That's
a very valid point. Thank you. And I will take that back to the levy board, because now we're getting the minutes from that board coming to this meeting. That's quite important. So thank you for that, Councillor Snell.
Well, I raised it at the last. I've raised it. The last meeting had Diane Abbott along, who had a wonderful time taking soundings from people on what they thought about opening up licensed premises, and it was, you could obviously tell she was really appreciating frontline feedback, so that was very useful. Now, the bigger point I was going to say is what Samantha was showing us on that training module was absolutely fantastic. I mean, obviously it's still in development, and I'm sure we can all help to improve it, but I was just a bit gobsmacked, because if that turns out as good as it looks, you know, have we copied that off anybody else? If that's something that we are developing ourselves, it is complete and total best practice, and we should be taking credit for it, and we should publicise it as wide as possible. I mean, I have to say more of that on when we get on to extending the late night levy, but it seems to me you're doing a great job, Samantha. But go on, I'm patting you on the back. Tell us where it came from and what you're going to do with it.
Thank you, Councillor Snell. That's very much appreciated. I'll go over Councillor Gordon.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, really totally echo what Councillor Snell was saying. This is really, really outstanding piece of work, and I think it's really, really pleased to see this come to the committee and, the part that everyone's played in its development. Similar question really to Councillor Wormers, but about the sustainability and environmental criteria. I mean, it'd be very good to see more detailed examples of this, and also it's important that it isn't just focusing on commercial waste disposal, that there's more challenging criteria in relation to sustainability in relation to materials used, recyclable materials, and also in relation to the food that's prepared. I mean, we Councillor Snell and myself were in a meeting on Monday of Scrutiny Panel where we were looking at Hackney's food strategy, and there's an organisation called Sustain, which again has done some work across different councils in relation to what we're doing here, using regulatory means in order to promote food sustainability. So I can certainly I was going to follow that up anyway with any other ideas, but maybe I can put, if you're not already, I can put Samantha in contact with them.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
excellent. Great. Any more questions about the report? And just to say thank you very much, Sam, and I echo what everybody said, and we look forward to getting more details. And I absolutely hear what people are saying about this not being a tick box exercise, and where we're unable to make, I mean, the critical thing is to find that balance between mandatory requirements and then pushing all the time to bring some of the things that we're extending from the mandatory into the mandatory, if you see what I mean. So, I mean, this is very much an ongoing process, and I think the issues of inclusion and the issues of sustainability are very much in the forefront of our thinking, and we really very much see this as a way to nudge and improve things where necessary, and there's a great deal of need for it, but also incredibly important it's going to be in the process of reopening as well, which is really good. So thank you.
Sorry, Chair, my hand was up.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Susan. You had the little thing and I didn't see it. I beg your pardon. Yes,
that's okay. I just want thanks very much for your comment, Councillor Muema and Councillor Snell, in terms of what you raise, and I think that has come out in conversation with this piece of work. And I join Peter or Councillor Snell to say thank you to Samantha and the team that has been working on this. It's a great piece of work. And today I had a meeting with the London NISA, and Samantha joined me for that meeting, and we mentioned this briefly to her. Just what you mentioned, Peter, about this will be a good innovative work for other boroughs to copy from Hackney. So thanks to Sam, and definitely the issue around access, we need to take that forward with Sam. Thanks again, and Emma for the scrutiny around this, making sure everything is done properly. Thanks for your input.
Thanks, Susan. That's really good, and yeah, very good to have meetings with Amy LeMay and the NISA situation, because I think we have a lot to offer in the London-wide thing on a number of issues, but certainly some leadership here. Great. Okay. Thank you very, very much, everybody. moving on then to item 5, which is the proposal to consult on changing the terms of the late night levy. And I'll ask David to take us through that, please. David,
Thank you, Chair. I keep saying to Samantha, Samantha gets to do the nice work with developers and stuff like that. When I have to introduce the procedural stuff to actually enable this to happen, but there you go. So item 5 is essentially the enabler to allow us to change the levy slightly to introduce a possibility for businesses, if they meet the accreditation criteria, to receive that 30% discount. So when we introduced the levy a few years ago now, we didn't. If members recall, we didn't include at that time any reductions or exemptions. So essentially, this proposed consultation is to allow for that to happen. So just looking at the report, if you refer to paragraph 4, the levy regulations, exemptions, expenses, exemptions, and reductions regulations, that's where it set out the actual criteria for the 30% reduction. So we have to introduce a scheme with which is referred to as a relevant arrangement, and that has to meet certain participating criteria to allow holders to receive that reduction. So it has to be the scheme has to be established for purposes which include relevant purposes. So those are relevant to the Licensing Act and relevant to the duties that the council has under the late night levy. It has to require its members to take steps to promote those relevant purposes, and it must also contain some provision for the cessation of membership. So essentially, if we'll have to maintain those memberships and that accreditation standard throughout the scheme, probably annually. So that scheme has to include some provision for someone effectively to lose that accreditation at some sort of point. So you could just see in paragraph 4.2, if quite a few businesses do receive accreditation, there is obviously some financial impact on the levy, but we'll just have to wait to see what that is at the time. But you can see that how the actual 30% reduction would apply to certain businesses. So those in the lowest band at the moment, paying £299 for the levy, would receive £89.70 off, and then that goes up to £447 for the premises in the highest band. And I've just included some numbers of the premises that we have in each of those bands. So you can see band B, there's 228 licenses of premises in that. So that's correct as of the time that we made the report, and that's obviously subject to change. These numbers are changing all of the time, but that just gives a sort of ballpark figure of what the numbers are that we have at the moment. In terms of timescales, we just got the draft council calendar this week, actually. So now we're in a position to be able to plot out when the consultation would happen, and when we'd come back to licensing committee, and then when we'd go to full council to make the actual decision. So we just found out on those dates. Just got those dates on Monday. I believe the full council is on the 20th. It's proposed to be on the 20th of October. So that would be when, there's effectively a final decision. But the licensing committee, I believe, is something like the 9th of September. So I think it'll be at the 9th of September. Licensing committee will come back with any consultation report. So that's it, really. That's very straightforward, and we'll just crack on with that consultation. So
Great.
any questions?
Yeah. Any questions? Any questions?
Councillor Snell's got his hand up.
Oh, Councillor Snell?
To be honest, I'm just going to carry on with this love fest rather than ask a question. But I just want to set a bit of context to this. I remember when I had a local pub watch here and a volunteer payment scheme, levy scheme to support the police and enforcement that won an award in Parliament. And it was quite clear when we first talked about this that this was perceived by landlords who weren't into that system as, there is a question at the end of this, I promise, at the end, that people who didn't understand how to be responsible licensees thought this was an extra tax. And what has happened has been transformative. Firstly, we as a council took our time and eventually joined in when we realised we could work with the police and do joint funding rather than it all just going over to the police. Then we appointed Samantha, which was absolutely wonderful because they completely love her. I mean, I'm sorry, David, you go on the council website and you do the hard guy and she does that, and I'm your friend. And she has been, and it's worked fantastically. Where we are now, if I understand this properly, is that those people who used to be the only people who paid the levy in Dalston are now the people who are going to get a discount because they'll do this training. They're probably already doing this training, half of them anyway. They will get the discount, and the people that we were taking the mickey before are simply going to be told you've got to pay the full whack, and we'll continue to know where to enforce. So it's helping our enforcement service. It's building bridges with the community. It's demonstrating. I mean, it was so nice when Diane Abbott came to that last pub watch because they feel a bit under threat. And obviously, we're a licensing authority, but we are good guys. We want to work with successful businesses, and this is absolutely a fantastic direction of travel. My question is, and I can see that Jan Ozen is also on this call, and we always have a disagreement about this, but I continue to believe that in my patch of Hackney, it's the late night off licenses that are the biggest cause of problem and nuisance to neighbours. Dan, I'm sure, is going to come in now and contradict me. But can we just make sure that this is not just about on-licensed premises? This has to also have a significant thing to address off-licenses, and in particular, basically carrying on selling alcohol to people who are clearly drunk and clearly causing a nuisance in the street. I'm fed up with hearing how difficult it is to enforce, but can we just make sure that we use this discount to encourage responsible retailing of alcohol? And I'm sure the public health team will fully support us in that. Thank you.
I think Samantha's going to bounce up and down and say yes, yes, yes.
Yes, absolutely. I think the incentivization of the scheme will really help engage with those off licenses, actually.
Okay, thank you for that. Do I have any more questions? Jean, did you have a question or no?
Well, I think we need different approach to off licenses, and then so just I don't want to talk about it right now. And then
okay.
So I think we should talk to off licenses first. What's happening? Tell them what we are seeing it, and then what we are thinking about it. Share our views with them. Let's see what do they say about it before we say anything. So it's just I don't want to go more than this. But in the future, yeah, we can talk. I can talk to Councillor Snell face to face. No problem. Those are one of the most hardest people, working hard people in the borough in the last 25, 30, 35 years. They transformed the area. They transformed the Hackney. So we need to be very, very sensitive with our approach. That's what I can say at the moment. Thanks.
I think. Samantha, do you want to? I mean, that's absolutely the approach we've taken already, and that's the intention going forward. And of course, a big hope in that is that the off licenses will participate as well through this in the pub watch system, which they're not so keen to do at the moment. And that would be a very, very much an aspiration of ours. So combining that consultation with them and bringing them into the consultative process. So any way we can do that would be really good. Okay, Councillor Peters.
Yeah, just to really make sure that I properly understood what we're asked to approve here. So there are criteria in paragraphs 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5, and it's the but are we just saying that you would qualify for the reduction if you meet the criterion in 3.5, i.e. that you are a participant in the best practice scheme?
Samantha, do you want to confirm exactly that?
Yes, exactly. So they would need to be accredited annually, and we would review their accreditation annually, and they'd have to meet all the criteria, all the mandatory criteria of the scheme each year in order to qualify for the reduction.
But the criteria in 3.4 we're not applying those criteria.
Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Peters, which 3.4?
Of your...
This is for a reduction for people receiving small business rate relief. No. So we're only applying the reduction to the scheme.
Okay. And sorry, the scheme is the Hackney Night scheme?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
So yeah, just to follow on from that, the criteria we have draft criteria, but as Samantha says, it's still being worked on, still being developed. But this consultation effectively is just a procedural step that we have to go through.
But the consultation will be on the business of the proposal that we have a reduction for a best practice scheme. It will be on that rather than any other form of reduction of not going to consult on any alternative. This is the one we want to propose. Yeah.
So the consultation is purely just to enable us to be able to do that. So it's not like on the criteria or anything like that. Just purely on the to allow us to change the levy effectively to enable the reduction.
Cool. Okay. Any more questions from anybody about this? Otherwise, are we all happy to note the report and approve the consultation?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So we'll move on to item 6, which is the commencement of cumulative impact research, which is to do with our special policy area. Over to you, David Tuitt, again, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report essentially to let the licensing committee know that we're about to start the process of looking at our cumulative impact research. So you'll recall that the current statement of licensing policy has 2 special policy areas within it, and those special policy areas are based on evidence, and we have a requirement to maintain the evidence base effectively. That came into effect just a year, just at the beginning of the year that the policy actually came into effect in 2018. So we're required to review that cumulative impact, to make that cumulative impact assessment at least every 3 years. So we're just coming up to that period now, and we will commence that work from April. So the process is effectively we look at the cumulative impact first, and we decide, make an assessment as to whether or not we should consult on it. If we consult on it, then that, and depending on the outcome of that consultation and the decision taken by the council, that cumulative impact assessment forms the basis of the policy. So we then decide, all right, do we want to revise the policy and go out to consultation on that policy also? So there's a bit of a more to it. Some members will recall that previously we just consulted on the policy, and that had the section in it on special policies on cumulative impact. So there's now this additional step. Just go backwards. This actually comes out of the Policing and Crime Act, where the government sought to put cumulative impact on a statutory footing. So we've now just got this additional requirement to consult on the actual evidence separately. So again, just going back to timescales, we'll commence that work. Already started in some places, just speaking to colleagues in public health and our partnership analyst. And the likelihood is that we'll be in a position to bring some research to licensing committee in June. I'm not sure to what extent, but certainly some research we'll be able to present in June. And possibly in September as well. So I don't know the full timescales timeline at the moment, but I'm hoping to be able to by June or September be able to go out to consultation, or sorry, to present the research that we would consult on.
Okay. Any questions about that now? No? Councillor Merson.
Yeah, so I do have a question. I think this is a good idea in principle. I'm fully supportive of this. I guess my question is, so I am part of the subcommittee with Councillor Odds and Councillor Gordon, and we have in the last, I guess, year, heard a number of applications in the SPA in Dalston. And I think what I would want to hear, well, see from the outcome of this is that we are able to update our policy in such a way that we can make a decision which looks at the full cycle of what happens when an applicant, or if an applicant is rejected for their license. It feels like there is a resistance towards doing that sometimes because an applicant will appeal. So I think any evidence that we gather needs to be, if you like, would support the council's or councillor's decision on committee to make it appeal proof as far as possible. They are both good policies, but I think it is actually increasingly difficult to not demonstrate, I can't say, think how to say it, but how to not demonstrate cumulative impact in an area. But we know kind of from reading the papers that are put before us and the people that come to committee that actually there is. So just, yeah, how does this feed into, let's say we update the SPA policy, offset concerns that I guess legal officers really, rather than councillors to be honest, have about that decision being overturned at appeal?
Yep. David, do you have anything to say about that particularly?
I guess I guess it's we do just have to look at what sort of evidence is out there. So not wishing to maybe predetermine or prejudge what evidence we collate. So I don't know. I guess my thinking at the moment is that there might be some policy changes that come out of this, but to what extent I don't know.
We don't know.
So until we've done that research, we'll. Yeah,
absolutely, and yeah. So we've got the research to do. We've also got the return after COVID. We don't know what state the whole industry is going to be in. We don't know. We do know that there will be questions about special policy areas because they've been raised already by the industry. So the industry is obviously on its knees, and therefore.
Yeah, no, I completely get that, but I suppose the balance that we have to strike in the moment. I'm teaching you to suck eggs, but it's just kind of balancing the industry's very real needs about survival with the people that live in those neighbourhoods.
Yeah,
and then I think we need to just redress that balance.
I think also
in the SPA.
with you having raised that, Sam, I think we have looked at having an after licensing committee meeting on the SPA and decisions in the SPA, and perhaps we should do that in the interim. That would be really useful. So if there are particular decisions that you would like us to review in that after session, that would be very helpful. So 1 or 2 that we could look at. I know the one we're looking at today, I can't remember whether it's in the SPA, but it's rather different. So the one we're looking at today is not a particular SPA one, but let's take that forward. I mean, because I think it's because that is also something that just is ongoing in licensing, that sense of, how do we do this right? How do we, keep our policy going? And also, yeah, exactly what you said. It's an important thing to keep reviewing. Any more questions on the Councillor Snell?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry I keep speaking on every item, but it's going to be quite a short meeting, and we have all sorts of people watching in, I hope, and they need to see us covering these items properly. So I want a couple of things. The first thing is the SPA, the cumulative impact, is actually working. This is going to end up as a question to you, Emma, so I'll warn you ahead. But basically, I was on corporate committee yesterday by virtue of being on planning committee. And there was conversation about licensed premises in town centres and how planning policies and licensing policies work together. And as far as I could see from the evidence, we have seen a change of planning applications in town centres covered by SPAs, reflecting a move to more sort of restaurant type activity and away from antisocial vertical drinking behaviour. So I don't fully understand why. I only got on that by accident, but it is where all the licensing people are brought together. I've got casework outstanding where planning seems to be pushing issues inconsistent with what we would typically regard as sensible on licensing. I mean, for example, we would always want a licensed premises to have control of its outside a licensed area, and yet that doesn't figure at all within planning considerations. So I accept that is primarily an officer's function, but it would seem to me that there ought to be some review, and I probably should have raised it previously, about how licensing is represented on corporate committee, because that does bring the various enforcement functions together. I don't know, Emma, you might be able to update us on that. The other, I mean, we've probably both been remiss. If we think it should happen, we probably should have got on and done it. The other thing is that it does worry me. Sem's questions are correct, but all of us, most of us here at this committee sit on these licensing committees, and there are clear different standards of proof regarding applications within an SPA and outside of an SPA. But ultimately, we are advised by the legal department. Amanda does a fantastic job. She's a worthy successor to her predecessor in taking us through all the detail. But we can't, it seems to me, our SPA cumulative impact evidence base will only ever take us so far. At some point that we have to jump into a place where we are advised by case law and statute, and we just have to, and I think, Sam, you might be disappointed, but I think what we're going to end up with is we can never take a cumulative impact assessment any further. Just to finish, but it's obvious that we are having an impact. We are changing the nature of planning applications coming forward in SPA areas, and that is good for the people of Hackney. Thank you. A couple of questions hidden away in there.
They were. I'm not going to answer the one about corporate, because I think that is something that I have discussed with the chair, and I think we should address going forward in the new year. Councillor Gordon, you had a question.
Apologies. I mean, it's probably really already been said, but I think it is. I really sort of wanted to sort of maybe reiterate the points that were well made by previous speakers. But I mean, I think it is very important that our licensing policies, can work as they've been, they're obviously evidence-based, and also that they work as intended as well. So I think that's really, sorry, no, it's probably fairly obvious, but it's been well made by the speakers, but just very quickly, thank you.
Thank you. That's useful. Councillor Peters, yeah.
Are we working to a timetable here in order to have to conduct this assessment? And if so, is the lockdown and is the pandemic going to affect that assessment? And then also, will there be useful outputs coming out from this that subcommittees can rely upon when faced with applications within the SPAs, which are inevitably accompanied by claims that actually we should ignore any cumulative impact?
I think in answer to the first question, I definitely feel that lockdown measures will impact on some of the statistical. So, say for example, the crime disorder data. There's no doubt that lockdown will, last year and the current lockdown that we're still in will have some sort of impact on the crime figures, let's say. But I also think that we might see a clear uptick in crime and disorder data from last July. So from when the lockdown ended, and I've having not seen any crime data, but I'm just thinking of the issues that police were raising to us. So through our various working groups, through partnership, tasking, through just conversations I've had with the licensing unit and SNTs, etc. So I think those figures will show, and they'll probably reflect in the other sort of indicators that we look at. So, ambulance call out data and A&E admission data, those sorts of things. I'd expect those to have tailed off dramatically during lockdown, the start of the first lockdown, and slowly start to tick up again. So it'd be a matter of us, compare, if we took a 3-year period, let's say, we'd look at those periods and make some sort of assessment over maybe what the figures would have looked like had there not have been a lockdown. I think it'd be fair for us to do that.
But just to sort of jump in on that very quickly, there isn't anything in the legislation that is a sort of like threshold, is there? So it couldn't be the case that because of the lockdown we would have to abandon our SPAs. No, we wouldn't have to do that. So that the legislation now includes the requirement to develop the cumulative impact assessment and consult on it. But then the guidance sets out, the Home Office guidance sets out the measures to control cumulative impact and steps that we could take to manage cumulative impact. So there's no sort of hard and fast threshold in that sense. And then your other question was in relation to, I think as that evidence emerges, I don't see any reason. I mean, Amanda, you could perhaps give a view on it as well, but I don't see any reason why we can't use that evidence once it becomes available. I believe that we would be able to do that.
Yes, I agree. Until you've gone through the process and made a formal decision, only then can we make it decide, how we're going to proceed with the SPA. I know you may or may not have heard that other local authorities have decided to remove certain SPAs from their organisation to probably to make things operate more easily and to put less restrictions. But I think that both Dalston and Shoreditch are very important SPAs for us, and we need to keep it as controlled as possible until we have the evidence to make a formal decision and have that properly recorded, so that we can, we have an audit trail and we can justify making the decision.
Okay, Susan, a question.
I think you're on mute, Susan.
You're on mute, Susan. Sorry. Yeah.
Thanks, I thought I've wrong button. I lower my hand instead of unmuting myself. Oh, in terms of the time, if correct me if I'm wrong with this policing and crime act, I thought in terms of the years, you can either is the choice of the local authority or Amanda to do either go back for 3 years or 5 years. And if that is so, because definitely the lockdown will have an impact in whatever we do. That is a year that we cannot rely on the data that we have both from the council and external partners to inform this this impact. And I'm wondering, rather than us going back in 3 years, can we not extend it back to 5 years, or what is the implication in that? Thank you.
I think when we last did the assessment or looked at the policy evidence, I think we did do a 5-year period last time. So yeah, by all means we could do that. It's just a matter of what statistics are available. So for us in licensing, we would look at numbers of premises and plot those on maps, and then our colleagues and the analyst she will then look at alcohol-related crime, for example, around those premises. But I think it would, if the data sets are consistent throughout that period, then it gives a consistent data set to analyze. So it really depends on what sort of data is available. But I would expect that we would have 5 years of we'd certainly have 3 years. I'd expect us to be able to have 5 years of fairly consistent
I think
data.
also we have to bear in mind what, local residents, often they want to have an opportunity to have some sort of input. So I don't know if we put it as 5 years, would that be restricting them in making any valid representations when we consult?
So sorry, Amanda, I don't know what you mean.
Oh, sorry, I'm saying that when you're gathering the stats and everything, are you gathering the information also from the surrounding area as well as the license holders?
No, so we would say look at the number of premises with a 5-year picture. So let's say we use the period ending 31st of March this year, and work back 5 years from there. We would look at, in licensing, we would say, right, we'll take all of the licensing, the changes in the licensing picture over that time, and then the crime analyst will look at any sort of alcohol related crimes and look at days of the week and times of the days, etc. Public health will provide us with ambulance call out data, alcohol related, A&E admissions, and then we'd speak to planning who have carried out Future Shoreditch, LP33, Dalston Conversation, look at what sort of qualitative data we might be able to find in those pieces of work.
With the LP33 though, that's only been in existence from July of last year. So
it has, but planning obviously did a considerable amount of work into it. So there's a lot of work in that carried out by our planning colleagues there. So it's just a case of, what have they got? They consulted, they commissioned studies and carried out consultation, that sort of thing. So the likelihood is that they have some useful data there.
Okay. Any more questions or comments on the? No. Okay. Thank you. We've noted.
Dave, sorry, just to have Dave, are we using any stat from London Transport at all? Because when you are talking of cumulative impact, it can happen in the immediate environment or further from there. So are we using any data from them in terms of?
I remember in the past we for Shoreditch we tried to look at what was it? So sort of gate numbers at Old Street and Liverpool Street, and
Great, yeah.
And then bus loading figures. But it was if I remember rightly, I'd have to see if I can find my notes. But I think the variations were too great, and it was too difficult to say, for example, categorically that these people coming through the ticket barriers or getting on buses were in the nighttime economy and stuff like that. So buses, you can always measure who gets on a bus, but not necessarily where they get off. So that was not something that we could use. I would expect that to be the same. So we've got to be careful not to just throw in a lot of data to make assumptions that aren't necessarily helpful, or could skew data to to paint a picture that's not quite right. So we tend to just stick to, right, here are premises, these are the sorts of issues that we have around these premises, and is there a correlation between the locations of those premises and certain crime types, and that's essentially what a special policy area is.
Okay, so thank you very much, David. We've noted that, and we look forward to the next chapter on that. Thank you. And now over to you again, David, please, for just the delegation of functions, the update. If you just run us through that so we're aware of that.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is very brief report, just for noting. It's so in the licensing policy, we have Appendix F, a recommended scheme, delegation scheme, which is taken from the Home Office guidance, and we're just making some very brief changes to that to reflect some recent legislative changes. So those changes. So I have the table or extract from the table in paragraph 3.3, which we'll insert into the Appendix F. So essentially, this relates to the expedited reviews, section 53A, summary reviews. We just have to make sure that we deal with those in the correct manner. And also section 172G of Licensing Act 2003, I should say. These are the off-license review provisions that were introduced as part of the Business and Planning Act last year. So it's just to make sure that those are properly reflected in the council's policy. And also personal license holder, there's some additional provisions for that. If a personal license holder receives a relevant conviction or is convicted of a relevant offence, there's a process now by which the police can object to them, that personal license holder maintaining or remaining a personal license holder. So we just need to make sure that policy reflects that provision there. And then in paragraph 3.4, we've just crossed out the word police, where the Home Office now have the same powers as the police. So the Home Office can object to personal licenses in the grant of a personal license in certain circumstances, and variations of DPS and transfers of personal licenses. That's following the introduction of the Immigration Act. And essentially that's it. So it's just a minor, if you like, procedural update on that into Appendix F.
Into the policy. Thank you. Any questions on that from anybody? Or just to be put into our policy so it's up to date. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. I think we don't have any other business for the formal committee, unless anybody does. No? Okay, well, in that case, thank you for attending Licensing Committee, and we'll close the formal meeting.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody.